and action.
Fast Eagle 110.
This is 110.
110, transferring control to Princeton. Remain at Cap 5, Angels 20, go to button 13. 110, we have a vector for you. Unknown contact. Ra 160, 41 at Angels 20. Repeat, bearing 160 at 41 miles, maintaining Angels 25.
Princeton, roger, bearing 160.
Fast Eagle 110, say loadout.
110, repeat.
110, what's your weapons loadout?
Winchester, just training missiles.
So they start going to go, hey, 20 miles, still nothing, I'm not seeing anything on the radar. 10 miles, we're not seeing anything on the radar. Well, they get to a point where they call merge plot, which means the contact that we're trying to see and us are inside the resolution cell of the radar. We start looking around because we're merged plots. Now you're into a visual arena, you're not as much worried about your radar. And I look out the right side, and I see something in the water, and it looks like about the size of a 737 in the water, pointing east. On the right-hand side of the airplane, just forward of the wing line, is this little white, which looks like a Tic Tac, which is why we call it the Tic Tac.
I just flew over on bullseye 008 for 20. I had a radar hit, and I was swinging. It looked like 30 knots, and there was something there.
Good morning from Philadelphia.
And James coming in from New York.
This is UFO News Network Sunday. I'm Frank Stalter. James in New York, and with us today from Florida, Dave Beaty, who's been doing a lot of work on getting some more details for us on the Nimitz case. Good morning, Dave.
Hey, good morning, Frank and James. Great to be here. I'm glad you invited me to join you today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great to have you on.
Absolutely. So, Dave, real quick, give us some background on how you got into this. You're picking up some new information about the Nimitz case, filling in some details that sometimes the mainstream media just doesn't have time when they do these quick little 5-minute segments on the story. Give us some details on that, if you could.
Sure. Well, a little background. I'm a video producer. I've been doing that my whole career. I started my work as a television news journalist, and I've always had an interest in UFOs, military aviation, military history. And of course, when I learned about the events that were announced in the New York Times, Washington Post on December 16th of last year, I was very excited because I'm like, that is very interesting that the United States government has these films of these unidentified flying objects, and they were filmed by military aviators. And it was actually a couple of the aviators came out and began discussing it, and it went along with the film that had been released. Of course, that was from To the Stars and the New York Times as well. So because of my background as a video producer, I thought, wow, I'm looking at all of these facts and reading these stories, but that would make a really cool video, But how am I gonna do that? I have no funding, and but because I can do 3D animation, I started conceptualizing putting the stories into an animated format so that the viewers could then understand kind of what was happening. It was a relatively short thing. It happened, at least the one that was released. I think that it actually went on a lot longer, but the story that was released, and I think first told in fightersweep.com back several years back, authored by a guy named Paco Charichi. And he wrote this article about the whole event. And because it was an industry sort of pilot's blog, not a lot of people knew about it. But then, of course, when the whole thing came out, everyone started looking and researching, and they found that article, which had a lot of details. I mean, he did a great job. So I started looking at it, putting all the pieces together and looking at the different stories, trying to figure out how I could write a script and how I could see if there were discrepancies, if things lined up, what matched, what didn't, and keep adding those little details and figuring out all the units involved, who was on the radio, who said what, who was flying in the planes. So that's kind of briefly how I got from, the beginning to what you just saw, a little teaser of what I'm doing.
Right, absolutely. Now, one of the things that you found out that I'm not sure has been reported anywhere else is that they were, during this main incident that's getting talked about a lot, obviously Commander Fravor, David Fravor, is been very upfront and very open about talking about this. And then his weapons system officer, I believe is the right term, Jim Slate, has also done at least one interview that I'm aware of. But there was another jet, and the person piloting that jet was a lady. Is that correct?
Yes, that's our belief. Now, again, these people have not all gone on the record. In fact, it's been told to me that some of them don't want to talk about it. Rightly so, as you know, in this subject. Sometimes there's stigma attached to it. If you report something that you can't explain, a UFO, it could damage your career and your reputation. People don't want to have anything to do with it. They just block that part of their life off, and write it off. Now, what I found out as far as the people that came forward and talked about it, there were two, and these are heroes, by the way. These are American aviator heroes that fought in the first Gulf War. You can see some of that if you ever go back and watch PBS's series called Carrier. In fact, David Fravor plays a big role in that documentary series. It's very entertaining, and I learned a lot about what these men and women do on these naval vessels. But what I found out is in the F-18 Super Hornet jets that they were flying, these are the F version, and they are two-seat jets. So in the jet, you have the pilot in command, and he flies the jet. And in the back seat, you have, like you said, the weapons system officer, and that person is in charge of the radar systems, the weapons systems. They have a big touchscreen display in front of them, and they can, manage the onboard radar. So as far as the jets that took off that day that encountered this object, they call it the Tic Tac. If you do read anything about it, you'll see Commander Fravor describe what they eventually saw. But when they took off that day, there were two jets. Usually they travel a lead jet and a wingman. So you have to realize that in that flight of jets, there's going to be four pilots, so to speak. There's the lead jet, the pilot, and his backseat weapons system officer. And then you have the wingman jet that goes along, and that has a pilot and a weapons system officer. Now, what we learned based on the pilots that came forward was that in the wingman jet, there was a person that came forward and said, I was the wingman. And that was former Lieutenant Commander. He's a commander now, or was retired. But Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate said that he was the wingman. In fact, I reached out to him via email. And eventually he got the email, and he responded to me very cordially and friendly and said that, hey, Dave, yes, I wanted to let you know that I was the wingman, and I'm excited for the project, looking forward to seeing it. And he said, if you need me to describe the Tic Tac at all, let me know and I'll let you know. But he hasn't responded to any more questions I asked him because more importantly, I wanted to know, hey, I have some research that says that the wingman of David Fravor's flight there, the pilot was a woman, a female. He didn't respond. But I can tell you where I got that information and how it progressed. It's kind of interesting. You remember I mentioned the fighter suite article with Paco. Well, Paco is a former Navy fighter pilot, also a hero. He flew the Grumman F-14 Tomcat back in the days before that was replaced by the F-18 Super Hornets on the carriers. So he knew the pilots and he knew Dave Fravor. He's a good friend of Dave Fravor. And he wrote this article. So I'm reading the article, and just one sentence in that article says something to the effect, when talking about Dave's wingmen, it says she and her weapons system officer were ordered into high passing cover, meaning the lead plane, the lead jet with Commander Fravor, he said over the radio, to the other jet, hey, I'm gonna go check this out. You guys stay in high passing cover. And then so Paco reports that she and her weapons system officer were put in high passing cover. So I put that out there on the internet. I'm like, hey, no one else said anything about this. In fact, everyone was saying that, Jim Slate was the pilot. He was the wingman. Well, apparently both of them are the wingman because it's one jet. It's called the wingman. The jet is, so both pilots in there are wingmen. I got a hold of Paco and I questioned him. In fact, I can read a little of that conversation if you want.
Sure, absolutely.
So here's how it went. And this was on Twitter, by the way, so you can read it. I said, hey, Paco, can you help me with something about this article, X-Files edition and Fighter Sweep? You referred to Commander Dave Fravor's wingman as her. Quote, Dave put Fast Eagle 2 into high cover. She and her Wizzo witnessed the events from perfect vantage point. Paco, wasn't it Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate, David Fravor's wingman on that day? Thanks. And then he responds, his wingman was a female, the two weapon system officers male. So I wrote, hey, thanks a lot. I respect that people do not want to come forward. Understood, sir. Everything is telling me that the former Lieutenant Commander Jim Slate was, the wingman on that day, and everyone was telling me that I have it wrong. In fact, what they were telling me is that, listen, hey, do you remember how back in World War II, bomber pilots would name their plane women? I'm trying to think of an example, but I know there's a couple documentaries about those B-17 bombers, and they would paint women on, and they named their plane women, and they referred to them in that gender almost. It's her. And everyone was saying, no, Dave, you got it wrong. The jet is a girl. They're calling the jet. That's what. But when you really look at that quote, it doesn't make sense that they were talking about a jet in the first person or something. It seemed odd. So anyway, I wrote to Paco. I said, everyone told me I was full of it, but I respect you jet drivers. You have my greatest respect. Thanks. And then he wrote back, all I can tell you is that the other pilot was a female. The two weapon system officers were male. I'm sure of my facts, and I just had lunch with Dave a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about all the details. And I wrote, just to confirm, I emailed Commander Slate to ask, and he said, hey, Dave, I was Dave Fravor's wingman for the Tic Tac incident in 2004. I was the Lieutenant Commander Department head in the Black Aces at the time, and I retired as a commander in 2013. And so then Paco says, hey, from what Dave told me, she will never come forward. She has zero interest in being involved. She was quite wigged out by the incident. Just so you know, our kind doesn't deal in misdirection or subterfuge. If we don't want you to know something, we just won't tell you. And so then I wrote, that's what I thought. I totally respect that. Hats off to you of your kind. Very few can do what you guys do, and even fewer gals, and make it look easy. A few of the few and a few of the few would ever go on the record about a UFO. He wrote back, perhaps he was the weapons system officer. The pilot was a female. So anyways, that just kind of went on for a few times. And I believe him, What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's a pretty excellent find. Yeah, attention to detail.
Yeah, I have no reason not to believe him. Absolutely. And there's no question in a couple of the other videos, you definitely hear a female voice in there. So there's no reason to think that there wouldn't have been one there. And especially
Right.
if Paco's saying this, well, why not? Why wouldn't it be the case?
Right.
Yeah, I
He
think
said he
he's
had lunch
prodding
with
in the
Dave.
right direction.
He had lunch with Dave, and if you go back and look at all the news articles, the New York Times, everything, it said that, you know, Jim Slate was the wingman. But again, you have to realize in the little circle of jets, there's going to be one other person that has not come forward. Apparently, according to Paco, he was a guy. He would have been the backseater in Dave's jet. So there's a guy there has never spoken about this incident. And then, of course, the female in the front of the wingman jet. I don't, you know, want to bring someone out of the closet or somebody, you know, name names. I don't even care, really. I'm doing a video, so I have to have, I mean, it'd be nice to know, but I have to have the voices correct. If it's a girl talking on the radio, then, you know, that's kind of important. But so anyways, you know, putting all this together, it's so cool because right now, you know, you heard a little of my like scratch track. Working on the radio communications, it's really interesting. There's another jet involved, and your viewers are going to find this kind of interesting if you follow the subject. There was a Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Kurth, and he actually was on the scene. He was from the Marine Corps Fighter Squadron. The Marine Corps Fighter Squadron, I forget their unit number, but they had been deployed to Nimitz to do training exercises on board a carrier. I think it's interdisciplinary training where you would have Marine Corps Air training with naval aviators on carriers so they have proficiency. That's why he was there. And he was in the air, I think even, you know, while Dave Fravor and stuff were just taking off. And he vectored to this area first and actually saw the white undersea object. So he observed that from his altitude, you know, tens of thousands of feet in the air. And he reported that and talked to the USS Princeton that was sort of controlling them. And he was there until Dave Fravor's 2-jet flight arrived on the location. And then they, you know, directed him back to home base for the carrier to land. I know some researchers have tried to contact him and talk to him. In fact, I think one of them even did a Freedom of Information Act and received a whole bunch of documents that he ended up, because he was the commander of that unit, ended up presenting to them. And that can be found on the NICAP website if anyone's interested in that. Those documents provided by Commander Kurth, or Lieutenant Colonel Kurth. So going forward on that track, I know I was kind of asking about that, and I did a little research. If you just Google that, I found out that he has an interesting career track. In fact, he's a hero as well, and currently he's, I believe, an F-35, you know, fighter instructor pilot. So our most top advanced multi-role fighter jet. He's one of the instructors now. But before that, and directly after he left the Marine Corps job that he had, he went to work with Bigelow Aerospace. And so he worked for Bigelow, I forget the years, like 2008 through, you know, whatever. And he was one of their managers, and he said that he was in charge of all the scientists. He was running that department. So, and that was the reason he told one of the investigators that he couldn't talk about the incident that occurred off Nimitz because of an NDA or a prior employment agreement that he had in place. So that's an interesting fact as well, because we know that Bigelow Aerospace during that time was running a lot of programs from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So that's another little tidbit.
Okay, got it. Now, one other little tidbit that relates to the other two videos. The video related to the Nimitz case is called the FLIR video, and the other two are the gimbal video and the Go Fast video. And they seem to be based on a number that is on the right side Well, there are some other reasons too. The same voice that exclaims "My gosh" is on both videos, and there's also a number on the right side of the readout that is 1688. Now, initially, someone was saying that they thought that was a flight number or a sortie number. That you're saying, or someone has said that is not the case, that relates to the infrared frequency as measured in nanometers, 1688. That's something that that particular device, that infrared device, the tracking system uses. Maybe you can go into some more details about that.
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because the news media got the videos wrong a lot of times. The general public doesn't know, and when they're doing interviews, like a live thing, even like this, you could be playing a video. I don't see what you're playing over my talking.
Oh, okay. Well, just to tell you, what I've got now is a frame grab from the video that looks like it's focused in on that particular device.
Okay, yeah. So what that device is, it's called the ASQ-228 at FLIR. And these devices, forward-looking infrared, are mounted on the underside of the jet, when they're needed. They're not there all the time. In all the videos that were released, the video came from this ASQ-228 at FLIR. I think it's Raytheon that manufactures that device.
Yep, that is correct.
And these devices are mainly used as, you would call it a infrared targeting pod. And these targeting pods are used for dropping laser-guided bombs and attacking ground targets like tanks and fixed structures from altitude. So the pilots use these as an infrared sighting and targeting device. The devices have built in a laser, and the laser can be used for tracking and spotting objects in the ground. For instance, you could fire the laser, and if you had a target designated being tracked, that laser is going to reflect off that target, allowing a laser-guided bomb to attack the target. So that's how the laser comes into use in these devices. As far as what we found looking at the 3 videos, we don't think that lasers were involved. We don't think they were lasing, because there's symbology that would appear on the display, namely a flashing L, meaning laser firing. So we didn't see that, so we don't think that they were actively using the laser. There's 2 modes of lasing. One is called a laser spot tracker, I think, and that's like I said, where you point it at an object and that's all it does. And there's another one called the target designator and ranger. In that way, the laser is functioning as a ranging device in providing distance to target information to the pilot. So it's actually giving the range of that object that you're hitting with the laser.
Okay, not to interrupt, but when you talk about like a rangefinder, you're talking about not dissimilar to a rangefinder you might use when you go golfing, that kind of thing?
That's exactly what it is. It's a rangefinder. So it can be used as a rangefinder, as well as marking a target to attack. The numbers that you see there, I think the 1688 or whatever it was, I believe, in the other experts that I talked to say that is a laser code. It's in an encrypted code that allows other planes and other units to see that laser and track it and bomb it. And I think that what I understood was that particular number, that code, based on the people that fly simulators and stuff, is sort of I think it was a NATO or a JTAC or one of these overriding air command frequencies, and it was sort of that frequency, meaning you can't fire a weapon on this frequency. It's like that's a frequency, encrypted code that don't bomb this, and it may just be that when you turn the unit on and fire it up, it just defaults to that frequency. So we don't think that is a particular aircraft number, so to speak. So, and hey, and just to clear up another thing, when we look at the videos with, for instance, the Nimitz video, the FLIR 1 video, Commander Fravor and Jim Slate in that flight that that video is based on, they didn't film the FLIR one video. That occurred afterwards, after they had landed, and a second flight of jets, who we have no idea who those pilots are, they went up because when they landed, Commander Fravor said, hey, put an FLIR on your guys' flight and get some pictures of that thing. So that's where that originated from.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, there's another little piece of the puzzle that I was not aware of. So we certainly appreciate that. James, what have you got for Dave?
Yeah, no, I had heard the controversy about the video footage not being from actually from Fravor's jet. So that is definitely interesting. But so do you have any details on the incident? Well, 2 weeks prior to the incident occurring, they were allegedly tracking these, or at least detect objects on radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was in, I believe, several of the reports, including Fighter Sweep, and they talked about the USS Princeton has a radar system on it. It's like an array radar. It doesn't even spin around. It's just on the side of the jet, a big giant array, doesn't move. But it's so sensitive that they were able to pick up this object coming in from like some super altitude, like 80,000 feet, dropping down to the surface of the ocean in a number of seconds. So that was kind of one of the first things that prompted them to send and vector other units out to that area. So it had been going on for quite a while. Now, I can tell you that I'm working with some of the people in the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. I give them a little plug here, who are investigating this scientifically and independently. They are all working on separate parts of this so that they don't corrupt
just to jump in, Dave, real quick. Is that the Robert Powell's group?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
They have a website, and I don't really know all the members, and I'm just helping a little bit on the side, to be honest with you. I'm not a member of that group, but I am helping them a little bit. And I did see the deck log for the Nimitz, which was acquired through a Freedom of Information Act. And I believe it covered a few days on either end of that event. It didn't go back, 2 weeks or whatever. And looking through the deck log of the entire day, there's no mention of anything odd going on. And in fact, when you look at the command of that aircraft carrier on the bridge, so to speak, they're noting course changes and speed. And when the commander's on the deck and everything they see from the bridge, they see, an odd object or something. But there's no mention on the Nimitz deck log of anything out of the ordinary going on. And I kind of looked through it pretty good. So I want to make that point. The other point, with that at FLIR and stuff, is that the other two videos that we have, as you know, were from 2015. So, many years later, whole different situation there. And the media oftentimes is playing the wrong video. So they were playing a video that was filmed like in another ocean in 2015, and then talking about the Nimitz event from 2004. There's just a confusion. And being a former journalist, I know how that happens. There's B-roll, so to speak. And they had this video, oh, look, it's a UFO, and they just plaster it up there like wallpaper over the interview without ever even, realizing that this is like something that happened like a decade later,
Mm-hmm.
And then people say there's some conspiracy. Oh, you can see they're playing this video. Well, and the people that are talking don't correct them. So they're trying to hoodwink somebody, but I don't think they even know about it. It's like added later, or like I said, they can't see what's on the screen. So they're just talking about the Tic Tac, and yet this other footage is playing from a decade later,
Got it.
Yeah, the gimbal footage. Right?
Yeah. That happened over and over. So,
and a lot of it is time constraints. They just, they're trying to squeeze a lot of very dense, complicated information into 5 or 6 minutes, and there's just no way you can do that.
No, and it's also how exciting it is. As an editor, I know that when I'm looking at some footage, I look at the FLIR, it's like this little dot, doesn't move. And then I look at this other footage that looks kind of similar, but wow, that's cool. And the guys are talking and you know, in the background you have the audio, oh my gosh, or whatever. Look at, there's a whole fleet of them, man. You know, bro, what is that, dude? You know, so they're like, that's better footage. I'm using that. And it's just a momentary decision, but of course it wasn't the right footage, you know.
Yeah. Now, also the I'm not sure if it was the Tic Tac. I think it was the gimbal footage. People were saying that was released like in 2007 on Reddit. Is that true?
I am not aware of that. I mean, I'm aware of the release of the FLIR 1 video, and there is somewhat of a conspiracy theory idea based on what happened. I think that appeared on YouTube, maybe around 2008 or something, and it also appeared on this obscure German website called Vision Unlimited. And Vision Unlimited was this website being used by, well, people that do visual effects and 3D animation like I'm doing. And the video appeared on one of their servers. I'm not sure how someone found it, but then it disappeared. But it was there for a while. And of course, the conspiracy would be, hey, like that video is not real of FLIR 1, the Nimitz Dave Fravor encounter, and so on. That's a fake video made by computer graphics students in this German, And so the whole story is thrown out. The Dave Fravor's lying, the government's lying, everything is a big lie to cover something up, which, you know, I don't know, maybe there's some other explanation of how that ended up there. Maybe the person anonymously posting it had some reason to put it on that German website. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know about the Reddit one. I never heard that.
I could have that wrong too. I could have sworn I heard somebody say that that's where it was released, but I did hear the German website, and now also, when you were investigating all this ATIP stuff, you did come across Bigelow, and did you also come across NIDS or Bass?
No, I mean, the only thing that I did find, you know, I mean, I follow all that stuff online. It's very interesting how the government basically was using subcontractors, you know, Bigelow Aerospace, and the funding for ATIP that was set up, and you know, the funding that went to Bigelow Aerospace. Obviously, going back before that time, you had NIDS going on in the investigation of Skinwalker Ranch, which I believe that he privately funded NIDS. I think. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but a whole other, you know, thing. Very interesting how this stuff ties together. And I know you guys are going to be talking a little bit about Metamaterials and so on. And when you start like putting the pieces together to this stuff, you're like, okay, Nimitz, and you had Douglas Kurth, the fighter pilot. Wow. Then he went to work for Bigelow Aerospace. And then you have Skinwalker Ranch, and you have these metamaterials that are being stored at Bigelow Aerospace. And, you know, there's still some really murky stuff there, but it seems to all tie together in some way.
Yeah, and Jeremy Corbell had said that in the Skinwalker Ranch documentary that he's doing, the Hunt for Skinwalker, that there's going to be information there that talks about what led into ATIP. So that's an interesting note as well. I mean, how do you connect those? That's going to be pretty interesting.
Well, didn't he say that there was a government intelligence participation at Skinwalker Ranch? You know, why is our government intelligence working with Bigelow Aerospace at this remote ranch? What's there that would prompt that, you know?
Exactly.
It's really strange.
Well, I've got a clue a little bit later on as far as the metamaterials go. I don't know if you could probably go to our live stream. There's about a 10-second delay, and you'll be able to see some of the slides that I'm going to put up related to that. And if you want to go ahead and do that. Like I said, there's about a 10-second delay between what we're talking about in the moment as compared to what you see up on YouTube. But you'll be able to see those slides if you do want to play along.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'm really interested. And I just wanted to go back and talk about the film that I'm making, because people might say, like, what is this film? Where is it going to be shown or whatever? And I wanted to let everyone know that, look, I'm just doing this like on the side, like after work, and I'm not being paid to do it. And I'm just basically going to put this together and put it out there in the community. To the Stars Academy was kind enough to let me use David Fravor's interview that you saw in that video, and you can also see it on their website, which really lends, you know, credibility to the account. So once this film's done, I don't know how long it's going to take me to put it all together and do all the voices and so on. But once it's done, you know, it will be out there. You'll be able to find it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think
It's
great
looking
that you're
good so
doing it.
far.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, 3D animation and rendering takes a long time. So
It does.
one little 5-second clip might take like 3 hours of computer time.
yeah.
So it's like, you know, one little piece at a time. And the hardest part was getting the models set up, like getting the jet models. One of the followers on Facebook was kind enough to shoot me like $30. So I had to buy a model online. It cost like $70, and you know, so people are helping out there and getting the modeling done and actually getting the proper you know, symbols on the jet and the unit numbers and the whole thing has taken a lot of time. But once that stuff's done, then actually animating in it is not as difficult. It's kind of fun, you know.
Yeah, it looks like it, for the most part, it's going to be pretty much straightforward path animation.
Yeah.
Which is
I have that. And the Defense Visual Information Center has public domain footage that's been filmed by men and women of our service, you know, our military service. So all that footage is out there.
This isn't good. Connection successful. Okay. Okay, it seems like we're back. Looks like we had some issues with the stream, unfortunately, but we are rolling. So sorry about that. Okay, back to normal, and let's see. Oh yeah, you were talking about getting the models together and doing the animations. Like I said, you're using Cinema 4D for this. That's quite a program.
I didn't quite hear that. I don't know if we're still connected, but I can tell you that the software that I'm using to do this is, you know, the Adobe Creative Suite, which is a complete post-production system for editing, and it integrates very well with the animation package, which is called Cinema 4D. That's the 3D animation software I'm rendering in.
Got it. And like I said, so far so good. So Dave, you were telling me before we went on the air that you have been involved in the UFOs before. You worked for MUFON a little bit, took a little break, and with all this, you got back into it. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. You know, I've always been very interested in the phenomena, and you know, from when I was a teenager, you know, I read a lot, everything I could get my hands on about the paranormal, UFO events, and so on. So, you know, fast forward to when I moved to Florida, because I did live in New York. I grew up there, upstate. And when I moved to Florida, I wanted to follow up and get a little bit more involved. So I found out that there was a mutual UFO network section down here. Got involved with that little bit. You know, did some studying on their investigative methods, and so I was a field investigator for a number of years down here. Studied a couple of interesting cases. There was one case that involved like a shiny metallic object that was captured on videotape above a neighborhood. A guy saw this thing, and probably at about, I don't know, 500 feet away from him at an altitude of maybe 100 feet. It was going along, and we looked at this video and investigated it with air traffic control. They had nothing on radar. But what really kind of sealed the case is I had sent it to Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who is doing photo analysis for MUFON at the time. And I also started noting all of the weather phenomenon at the time. And it appeared that this object was going in the same direction and speed as the wind was going. So in that particular case, we determined that it had to be some type of balloon. It didn't really look like a mylar balloon, like the normal kind you see in the store. It was sort of trapezoidal, and it had different sections of it, almost like if you had two trapezoids side by side, and then it was going along like this. So, and this one individual that filmed that actually had filmed a similar event, I think up in Augusta, Georgia, earlier in his life. So he said it looked like the same type of object. So even though it seemed to be, you know, okay, this is a prosaic mylar balloon flowing with the wind, he kind of disagreed with our assessment on that. Another case that I got involved in, my mom actually happened to live in Gulf Breeze, Florida, and you guys kind of probably know what that is.
Yep.
Yeah, the big UFO flap over there.
And during the Ed Walters UFO, and of course, I know that some people don't believe Ed Walters, and so on. I don't know. I don't have a judgment on that. You know, while his sightings were going on, after he wrote his book, The Gulf Breeze Sightings, there was another UFO that was there, and it was a red light UFO, and they nicknamed it Bubba. So this would have been, I think this would have been like mid 90s or something. And so I used to go up there, and we would sky watch at Shoreline Park, and all these people in the area would go there at night with their binoculars. Of course, I never saw it when I was there, but my mom did see Bubba, which would appear over the bay, this red light. It would just kind of move slowly. They got a lot of footage of that thing, but I don't know that they ever explained what that thing was. But it's kind of nice when you have a predictable UFO. You can go someplace and it shows up every night, you know.
That would be nice.
Yeah, very interesting case. So that's kind of my, investigative stuff back many years ago. I got out of ufology for a long time, didn't follow it. But, when the announcement came, and, maybe 3 months, 4 months before that, when To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science announced the formation of their group, and, the top level people, the top level government, intelligence, aerospace coming together with Tom DeLonge is just unprecedented. I mean, it makes you stand up and take notice and say, obviously they're going to tell us something is coming out. And they give us these videos, and they say, we don't know, Louis Elizondo says, we don't know what these are. We want to know. If someone out there can help us explain what these are, that would be great. We don't know what they are. So there's that side of it. Then there's, well, maybe they know what they are. And looking at all of that, the whole thing, I just can't decide. I don't know if it's like, okay, back in the 50s, we got Nazi technology that we after the war, our intelligent operation went into Germany and got all these scientists and got all their papers and all their research of the planes and UFOs that they were building, and then we brought it back to the United States. And since then, we've created anti-gravity ships, the Astra, and like UFOs that you see are our technology, because we actually have secret technology that's anti-gravity stuff. That's just speculation. I don't know if that could be true. Why would, what do you guys think about that?
Well, yeah. I think there's a real good chance that we're being visited. There's enough evidence out there, radar tracks corroborating witness accounts. I'm not sure. I believe it was you, but they had at least 5 different radar hits on this UFO involving with the Nimitz case. 5 different ones corroborating what the pilots were saying.
So, do you guys think it's possible that there's both, that we have this technology in our, hands, and there's visitors as well?
I'm sure I'm sure we're pretty advanced. I'm sure that we've advanced a long way, but I don't think it. And I'm sure some UFO sightings are our most advanced gear,
right?
But I don't think it accounts for all of them.
Right. To me, it makes, like we're gonna invest, billions and billions of dollars in a program like the F-35, advanced fighter, and all the whole aerospace industry. Yet, oh, back here we have the Lazar sports model that we're flying around in the desert, and we're not going to tell anybody, and the civilian population never gets to use any of this cool tech that we have. It seems kind of a little far-fetched, like that we wouldn't have actually, commercialized that in some way, but I don't know. On the other hand, the whole UFO phenomena, the evidence is overwhelming that we're these things are real. People are seeing them, and it goes way beyond the nuts and bolts of discs. It goes farther into very, very high, strange witness encounters of what would appear to be aliens. They throughout the last 100 years, we have numerous reports of.
David, you're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep,
James,
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. James, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you might be running into some technical stuff on your end. So I'll tell you what, you want to hang, and looks like your webcam is frozen at the moment. Oh, no, I just saw you blink, so you're okay. Can you hear me okay? Dave is...
I hear you fine.
Yeah, you can hear me, but I think
Yeah,
there's an issue on Dave's end. So there was an issue with us going streaming up to YouTube, and now it looks like Dave might be having some little issues. Can you hear me okay, Dave?
Yeah, the audio has not broken up coming on the inbound side.
Okay,
so
yeah, coming out to our end, you were breaking up a little bit. Is there anything that we missed that we didn't ask you about that you think you've got that's pretty hot and most people probably don't know about it?
No, not. I mean, I love talking about all of this subject matter and contemplating it. So I don't have any. I mean, the Nimitz case in my little film is the thing I'm working on. So that's about it.
Okay, yeah, I think it already, just for no other reason, the hullabaloo that surrounded it, it's a top 10 all-time case already.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole thing with the ATIP and the To the Stars Academy, and as I understand it, the New York Times is working on another article as well, right?
That's what I've heard, so we will see. We will see how that plays out. One thing, they are taking their time about it, so I'm not going to hold my breath. But when it does come, obviously we'll know about it if it's coming out through the New York Times. We won't have to dig for that.
Well, people say this is disclosure. We're seeing the government is going to announce to the public that we are being visited by these craft and these are real. I mean, they've said that, but how much more they know, I don't know.
We will find out.
It's interesting that I mean, in consequence to all this surfacing, the government has denied any kind of involvement with UFOs since 1969 with the end of Project Blue Book.
Right.
So this is an on-the-record thing saying, okay, even though over the last, 10, 15 years, there's been a ton of petitions trying to, get information about UFOs through the government, they've denied any kind of involvement. But this proves that there is, in fact, an inquiry and involvement by the U.S. government. And also, the New York Times reported that there were other programs. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
It's a very big deal, and then you combine that with the fact that no one has been independently able to get the Pentagon to release anything acknowledging this program, the ATIP program, or even say that Louis Elizondo worked for them. They haven't found any. In fact, I think the public spokesperson said, we didn't release these videos. We didn't put these out to the public. So you have that side of it as well. But like you said, the fact that, the government did release these videos, which I sure would be classified, from these FLIR camera systems is really incredible. And the fact that Louis Elizondo, the head of that program, coming out and explaining to everybody how it worked is just mind-boggling. Very exciting.
Just to jump in here real quick, Dave. James, you got a little piece of some speculation, at least, but considering it came from Gary Nolan, who's on the advisory board of To the Stars, he's the source on this. You got some information from him in terms of how he thinks that those videos might have gotten out. So I'm not sure if Dave knows this or not, and I'm not sure a lot of our listeners know about it, but why don't you share that?
Which I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay, Gary Nolan had said at one point he thought that they were able to get those videos out prior to their big announce date through Freedom of Information Act requests.
Oh, well, I think I'm not sure where that came from, but I heard that they were actually previously declassified. They got them declassified through the Department of Defense in August. Or they were in the process of getting that done.
Right. That's what they got it declassified. But I believe Nolan had said that it was his speculation that it was declassified, and then they filed FOIAs to get the material out before the Defense Department got bombarded with FOIAs after their announcement came up.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I don't know if we're ever gonna hear more about that.
You know, it's sort of funny that Louis Elizondo and To the Stars says, "Oh, anyone can get this material by filing a Freedom of Information Act," and we encourage everyone to do that. But so far, no one has gotten even one sentence that acknowledges the program even existed from the Pentagon. But the fact that the New York Times said that they did. I think the New York Times is one of the most trusted journalistic, high ethical, newspapers. The fact that they printed the story to me says that they had evidence presented to them that they vetted and found it to be true. So anyone can say anything they want that this program didn't really exist and it's all like fabricated. But the fact that New York Times says it did, I have to believe that they saw the evidence.
And Harry Reid has gone on the record saying that he was involved. He was the one who got the program started.
Yeah,
exactly.
And for the New York Times, Leslie Kane said that she personally saw the documentation proving that these videos were declassified by the Department of Defense, and that is no question. And the New York Times was satisfied with the documentation proving both the program existed and that the videos were indeed declassified by the Department of Defense.
Right. She saw the chain of custody and said that the individual that provided this is not going to be named, and they are not going to be providing that evidence to the public. That's their source. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's.
The only other, I was going to say one more thing. The only other nuance to this is that you have the two names, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. That has a lot of people confused as well, and that they said that's interfering. They're trying to FOIA both of them. They can't get anything.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the investigators, Greenwald, I think that he said his contact at the Office of Secretary of Defense told him personally that they had the name wrong, and that's why something to that effect. But I presented him with Louis Elizondo on camera saying, hey, there's been some confusion about the name of the program. I want to clarify that. And this is the guy that ran the program saying that the name is Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. So he said it. I don't know why, unless he's covering something. I don't know why he would lie.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's switch over into something that I've been looking at for a little while. But it certainly fits in with what Dave has been doing, trying to dig in and find out more about a completely different aspect of all this, which is the metamaterials. Now, I've been looking at materials research and advancement since World War II. Not since World War II. I'm not quite that old. I'm getting up there, but I'm not that old.
Not yet.
When you look at the materials advancement that we've gone through from not long after the Roswell crash, it's been a very interesting subject. And one of the things that was brought up as a result of the Time story and some other comments made by Mr. Elizondo, there are these materials that are being studied, and a lot of people are looking for them through FOIA requests and such. But the reality is, this is a study that's been going on for quite some time, including fragments from crashes or just pieces that have dropped off or been ejected from UFOs, and that's been going on for decades. And a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, that just because TTSA is talking about it doesn't mean that this study has involved has involved the government at all. So if the government never had the material in the first place to study it, then obviously a FOIA request is not going to do you any good. And this all sort of began around maybe a week to 10 days after the initial Time story. Gary Nolan is a member of my Facebook group, and what he did basically was just give us, he must have had a little bit of free time in between semesters, whatever the case may be, is working away at Stanford, trying to save kids' lives with cancer cures and looking at the DNA of not an ET from Peru, and also working with TTSA, also conducting a study on experiencers with Kit Green. So he's got a lot of irons in the fire. But he did have enough time to do a real quick sort of Ask Me Anything at my Facebook group, and he talked a good bit about the metamaterials and how the isotopic ratios are different than anything that that we have here on Earth. So it's a very interesting subject. And of course, he went as far as he could in the real brief AMA. Nobody who asked him questions, including me, really had looked into it all that carefully. So maybe the questions were a little bit superficial. But as I've continued to dig in, I have found that this type of research has been going on for some time. And there's a paper from Peter Sturrock that he wrote. I can't pin down the paper, but the most recent citation in the paper goes back to the late 90s. So I'm guessing it was 2000, maybe very late 90s or 2000, the early 2000s. He wrote a paper about that. Jacques Vallée did a full hour-long presentation about it at the Contact in the Desert conference last year. None of these things have really gotten a lot of attention, or they've kind of fallen by the wayside over the years. But I've been covering it a little bit, and at my website, I've got the original AMA with Dr. Nolan, and also have added to it and compiled in that one article the updates as I found additional material. So what I've got is, as far as I know, the best compilation of material related to the metamaterials. And so I've got that over there. You can find the link to that at our page on YouTube if you're watching the YouTube video now, or just go to ufopartisan.blogspot.com. It's very easy to find once you do that. But basically what Vallée covered in his presentation was some details, and let me update the slide here. And basically there's a whole list of possible ET materials. Some of them he's been able to study, some of them he has not. One of them was actually in the hands of NIDS, which is, I believe, the National Institute for Discovery Sciences. That is Bigelow's organization. He has not been able to study that, but I'm going to assume that they acquired that privately through their research at the Skinwalker Ranch. There are some others. Possibly something was recovered in Aurora, Texas. Valet doesn't have access to that. Something related to the 1952 DC UFO incident, doesn't have access to that. What he does have access, and he spends a lot of time on, is the material discovered in Brazil back in the the incident took place in the 1930s. It goes back that long. But the material became available for study in the 1950s. And Valet goes into some detail about that. And also, he cites a paper written by Professor Sturrock, like I said, roughly 2000, give or take. And in that paper, Professor Sturrock concludes, as far as one can tell from analysis carried out to date, there is no case for believing that the Brazil magnesium specimens had an extraterrestrial origin. On the other hand, it has not proved possible to identify where the material was produced. And throughout the paper, what he does is he goes through all the different tests that were run on it, how he acquired samples from different countries to compare this to. Is this just the way they process this magnesium differently in these other countries that could cause it to have that different isotopic ratio? So there's a lot of detail, like I said, at the website. A link to the full paper, the full hour-long Valet presentation on the matter. These guys are the scientists. They do it a lot better than I do. For me to sit here and explain it, it's a little bit outside my weight class. But you've got a good 2, maybe even 3 hours of entertainment if you watch the entire video and read through the paper, as far as bringing yourself up to date. But the main point that I want to make is that a lot of people are thinking, because TTSA is talking about metamaterials, oh, it was necessarily related to the ATIP program. That is not entirely the case. They may have some different materials that the military discovered. That is certainly possible, but it's also certain that some of those materials always have been, and in private hands and never in the hands of the United States government. So I think that's really key. And as a result of that, of course, that is the type of thing that all the FOIA requests in the world, no matter how well written they are not going to be of any assistance, because, again, the government's not involved in this at all. It's completely private. It hasn't been privatized. It was always private. And that's kind of the key there, I think.
Yeah, and you know, it's pretty interesting too that Tom DeLong, he mentioned something about aiming terahertz at it and the material gaining lift, and that's provable.
Yeah, supposedly from what I have heard, that was something that was suggested by Hal Puthoff. I don't know if that's correct or not. That's obviously something that happened apparently, so I shouldn't say obviously, apparently something that happened well after Professor Sturrock's paper. It might relate to materials that were not studied, that weren't part of the Ubatuba incident. That is a little unclear. We're not can't be 100% sure about that. But what is sure, like I said, is that these materials do exist, and this type of study and this find that the isotopic ratios are different than what we're generally familiar with in normal manufacture of these kind of alloys, that is significant.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
You know, in the New York Times article, they mentioned that Bigelow Aerospace had actually constructed buildings to house these materials. So I guess my understanding from what you said is that, you know, Bigelow Aerospace has some materials, but then there's other materials that are being studied by other scientists as well. It's not, they don't have all of them, in other words.
Right, exactly. It's the whole thing is not mutually exclusive, and apparently this is this difference in the isotopic ratios is something of a common thread. At least that's what it seems to be at this point.
Yeah, I kind of briefly looked at that your website on the UFOpartisan.com website, and it said that anyone reading this material wanting to understand it should try to get a basic understanding of what isotopes are. Otherwise, it kind of goes over your head. It was kind of like a little confusing, so I'm going to have to take a look at, go back to high school chemistry or whatever. And
it does get dense. It gets dense in a hurry, and it does put some people off. But again, I think the key here is that a lot of this material is not necessarily in the hands of TTSA. Just because they're familiar with it doesn't mean they have it. They may have some. They certainly do not have all. But I think that's about where we're at the moment on this. And, obviously we'll look to find out more. And I know we've got Stanton Friedman coming on next month. Certainly he's got the physics background. He was a working physicist before he got into the UFO research full time. So he'll know this stuff. He'll know this stuff pretty well. But this is not necessarily for the casual observer. You do have to dig in a little bit more for this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to bring up that there is also a video out there on YouTube that I believe Linda Moulton Howe presented on what are known as the arts parts. And again, these have been discussed for a long time. They were anonymously shipped to them. I guess Art Bell, God rest his soul, and Linda, for study. And in the paper that went with this was saying that my grandfather worked for the Army Air Corps, and he was part of a crash recovery team, and he got this, what I would call metamaterial. And so he wanted, he wanted to be anonymous, and he sent these to these UFO researchers. So there's some controversy about it. I started a thread talking about it, and lo and behold, a scientist that actually studied these parts shows up in my conversation, which kind of blew me away, and starts saying, "Oh yeah, I studied these. These are arts parts. There's not a lot of special properties to them." But one thing to remember, the parts that they had, these metamaterials, were magnesium bismuth or something, and supposedly we don't have the manufacturing capabilities to create that type of layering, but you can go out there and see that film, and the PowerPoint she does. It's very interesting.
Yeah, we will. I'll have to take a look at that. We will have to see how this plays out. I do know that people have been looking at different materials, thinking maybe they've got something. They spent pretty nice chunk of money on getting it researched, and a lot of times it comes back, well, it's weird, but this was made on Earth. And obviously then you get other situations where they're taking a look at it and they can't figure out who made this stuff. And if it wasn't made here on Earth, well, then obviously you're left with only one other option.
Yep, that's true.
So, okay, we have lost James. So if I could do this, let me, we'll wrap up here. I don't really have anything more. Like I said, the main thing is I want to point people over to the site and get the full details from the best sources. But we lost James. So let me end with you really quick. And because what I can't do it, unfortunately, through Skype is to recall James. I have to end our call and then add James. James, unfortunately. Oh, you're back. You're back. What happened?
Yeah, no, I got cut out in and out a few times when Dave was talking.
Got it. Okay, so you're still with us. James, do you have anything else?
No, that's about it.
Okay, Dave, do you have anything else for us?
No, I think that it was really enjoyable talking to you guys and explaining what I'm doing. It's a very exciting time.
It's fantastic. Obviously, we'll be staying in touch. So when you got some new stuff, obviously, we'd be more than happy to have you back. We've got our guest lineup coming up any old time. If you wanted to jump in and ask a few quick questions, either jump on board live or get them to me, we'll get them answered for you. And I think we had a successful number 2 show.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back next week. Steve Bassett is going to be our guest next week, so we'll have a lot to talk about with Steve. So have a great day. 3 hours from opening face-off time. Let's go Flyers. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.